Before we dive in, a quick note. If you want weekly tools to grow and lead your business, sign up for my free newsletter at stevepreda.com/newsletter. Good day, dear listeners. Steve Preda here with the Management Blueprint podcast. And my guest today is David Steele, a serial entrepreneur and the founder and CEO of One Wealth Advisors. David, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, great to have you, and you have a very interesting career and interesting businesses, and you keep a lot of balls in the air, so I'd like to dig in. I was very interested in what I read on your website about your personal mission and why you do things. So would you mind sharing with our listeners what your personal why is and how you're manifesting it in your business and businesses?
My personal why, it's always people. And everything I've done in my life is about figuring out ways that I can help people. I have done so in what is seemingly different businesses. My primary role is founder CEO of a wealth management financial planning company called One Wealth Advisors, which we work with a little over 400 families, helping them manage their financial lives. But I've also created 2 restaurant companies that are, I think, involved in the conversation of culture. They're cool, they're interesting. They combined have currently 7 restaurants with 4 more across them opening over the next 6 months. And these are seemingly different businesses. But for me, it's really people. The financial planning company I see as a hospitality business. We serve people. I'm very skeptical of the majority of the financial services industry, which tries to sell their value proposition on their technical wizardry or unique perspective on how they think about investing or tricks or whatever. And for us, it's like that's commoditized. Everybody's doing the same stuff. Our value proposition is there is nobody that will envelope you with more care, love, and service and attentiveness and responsiveness and proactiveness in the industry than we will do. And we can compete with that. And when I describe my financial planning company that way, and I then talk about restaurants as hospitality businesses, which is not much of a stretch, where we envelope people with deliciousness and great service, the common thread comes through. But maybe the more common thread for me is my partners in these different businesses, which is my role in their lives is to help them as individuals, as partners in our companies, to live happy, peaceful, productive, feeling valued. And so for me, I do the same thing every day, all day, but everybody else sees these different weird things. On the board of a coffee shop company and another restaurant company and a music band management company and a music production company. And my view on all of those is that I'm there to provide hospitality and service to the founders and the executive teams of those companies. So for me, it's all people.
Very interesting. I mean, the hospitality angle and the quality of life angle, I saw it on your website. You really didn't talk about financial performance there at all. You talk about how to improve the life of your clients. That's kind of the big theme there. And I like the blogs as well. That also comes back to quality of life thing. So anyhow, I don't want to get too deep in this because what I'm curious about is frameworks. This is a podcast of frameworks. And I wonder, what is a framework that has worked in your life that is simple to explain, maybe 3 to 5 steps that you could share with the audience that they could help their own businesses or themselves by implementing this or thinking about things in a clearer, simpler way?
It's so basic. The key to life, in my mind, is so basic. Identify goals. 2 are too few. More than 5 are probably too many. And I don't care if it's for your business, for your life, for a relationship. I don't care what it is. Actually identify those goals, articulate those goals, clear, concise, as few words as possible. Try to apply some type of measurable to those goals. And then once those goals are articulated, you can measure them, whether they succeed or fail. It becomes pretty clear what a strategic plan might look like to achieve those goals. And I think that goal setting is human magic. I've written a couple of life plans throughout my life, and I never looked at them again after writing them until many, many, many years later. And lo and behold, I achieved everything I'd written on those life plans. I usually don't look at them for 10 years. And I just think the clear articulation of the goal, sharing the goal or goals with people, because then you become accountable to yourself, to them. It's out in the world. You're going to achieve those things.
Okay, so identify, articulate, share, measure, and execute. Is that the framework?
That's it.
Yeah, love it. That's great. Yeah, I mean, goals do have a magic to them. So if you don't ever look at them, how do you not forget them?
I think that's the human magic part. I mean, for a business, I do believe goal setting and strategic planning should be a continual process. And so for life planning, I think it's probably okay to articulate your goals and maybe not look at them again. And I don't necessarily think for life planning you need to have a written strategic plan. The human magic part is if you say you want to do something in life and you articulate it and you share it with people, the human magic part is it's now present forever in your subconscious. And so energetically, you're going to, I think, very naturally orient yourself around those goals just simply in your everyday existence. And I think that's for maybe for life planning. For businesses, I do think it's best to have a framework for this. And so my businesses use, and I don't care what the framework is. We use objectives and key results, OKRs, but they're pretty commonly used now. And I don't care if you use KPIs, OKRs, or whatever it may be. You and your team should sit down each year. And ideally, you already have a long-term vision for the company, which should be pretty concise and focused. And then your annual goal setting in between and what I'll call tactical plans or mini strategic plans that you can then look at each quarter. With the objectives and key results, we assign a leader to each objective. The leader understands that they are tasked with organizing the necessary team members to achieve the goal. We have key results that we define in our annual strategic planning meeting. And then we have quarterly check-ins. I'm the CEO of the financial planning company, so I check in with each leader every quarter to see how they're progressing on their objectives and the key results for those objectives. And then for the restaurant companies, I am the executive chairman of both of them and co-founder, and I meet with the CEO, but the CEO then meets with the team to check in on the progress of their goals. So the human magic part is this idea that you can just say, I want to do this thing, write it down and not look at it. But I do think for business, it probably requires a little bit more of a consistent, rigid, written organization.
So help me with these OKRs. I mean, I'm familiar with the OKRs, but what I'm always wondered about was that when you have key results for every objective, then is this not too limiting in terms of having to choose the kind of objective which you can measure with the key results, as opposed to, and maybe this is my blind spot here, maybe there are some objectives which don't lend themselves for regular measurement of key results, but because they are maybe binary. Either we acquired this new location or we didn't. There are not really much key results other than it has to be a size, profitability, whatever. So I don't know, maybe I'm rumbling here, but what is your view on this?
Well, I mean, I would push back a little bit in that, let's just say your objective is to acquire through vertical or horizontal integration another business. I think a key result may be throughout the year, what is the process by which you're searching for the potential companies to acquire? What is your vetting process? What is the activity around outreach, vetting, analysis? Maybe there's a square peg round hole problem sometimes with this, but I don't think there's a negative to articulating the binary objective, even if it's imperfect key results that you're going to be using to measure them.
Yeah, I think I need more clarity on this. I always thought of the two sides of the coin is you got the easily measurable things, which typically pertain to the ongoing business, growing your business, executing processes, doing sales activities, this kind of stuff, which is working on the present. And then you have those big, whether you call them OKRs or rocks, those big objectives that is going to build more capacity in your business for the future so that you can expand that business. That maybe it's hiring a key executive to own your marketing function, which key results are maybe trickier to find, but they are really important for the future. Do you see any distinction between these two? Or?
I mean, maybe, but let's go back to the original. What started this conversation was I just think one should have a framework. I don't care what the framework is, and all I'm arguing for is identifying and articulating goals and figuring out some strategic planning process to achieve those goals. I actually don't really care what it is. I've consulted on a bunch of different businesses, helping entrepreneurs start businesses, probably close to 8 now. I am shocked at how when all I'm expressing to them is written goals that you can articulate and measure and build a strategic plan on, it's just that concept is not natural to them. I think if people start with the basics, they're ahead of most, frankly, and this is about as basic as it gets.
Yeah, that's true. So what drives growth in your business, in the One Wealth Financial Advisors business?
We're in a very luxurious position, and I tell people I'm the richest person they've ever met, and people are like, what? And I say, well, I have everything I want, and you can't be richer when you have everything you want. There's no such thing as richer than that by the way I define it. And where I'm going with this is I have tried to espouse a philosophy across the company of every team member should spend less than they make, no matter what it is, and not overextend themselves with commitments like a mortgage that is causing them stress and anxiety, and so forth and so on. So there's a fiscal discipline that's espoused across each team member, and most importantly, me and my brother, who we started the company together. We are the major shareholders of the company. If we take that approach, that's number one. The second thing is we do not have any sales, marketing, or business development efforts whatsoever, which is shocking to 99% of business people that I talk to. But it's couched in a philosophy of the greatest salespeople we're ever going to have are our clients talking to their friends in their network. And if we put literally 100% of our effort into serving our clients for free, we'll spread the word. They'll be so excited about what we do for them and with them that they will be more than willing that if somebody asks them who they should talk to or they work with, the answer is us. We've been doing that for almost 20 years now. The practice started 35 years ago, but we've been doing that for almost 20 years. And our annual growth rate is at about 20% a year without any business development or marketing whatsoever. We could be growing probably more than that, but we keep our spending within check. We don't overextend ourselves. So it doesn't force us to have to grow and stay on that treadmill. The idea of being on a treadmill to make sure I keep up just causes me stress and anxiety. So I don't like that. So that's one wealth. Now, restaurants are a less good business. My financial planning company will do $7.5 million in revenue this year with 13 employees. My first restaurant company will do $30 million in revenue with 350 employees. It's a much more labor-intensive, harder business. And the people that I started the restaurant companies with, just to be blunt, for them to develop wealth so they can afford to take care of their families the way that they deserve to for their talents and their creativity, et cetera, you need to grow. And so the way we define growth in the restaurant company, just frankly, is through building the organizations so they are ready to scale. That is to say, there's leadership that has been trained and has mastery and understands how to lead each level of layers of management, and then opening new restaurants. Or with one of our companies, it's a line of consumer packaged goods. The Flower and Water Hospitality Group is my first restaurant company, and we launched frozen pizza in 40 grocery stores, and we have dried pasta in 75 stores now, and we're going to really try to grow that. And that's measurable, right? That's new restaurants, it's more grocery stores, it's more revenue, and so we're a little bit more intentional about growing those businesses.
That's really interesting. So when you grow a wealth management firm by 20% over 20 years, then it's really maybe half of that comes from the appreciation of the assets, doesn't it?
No, and I know where your head went, which is S&P 500's grown at 10% a year for the last 100 years. But the truth is about 55% of our clients' assets are in equities on average, and about 45% are in bonds. If you're younger, you've got more equities. If you're older, you've got less, and whatever. But the average annual return for a portfolio like that is probably something closer to about 6.5%. So about a third of our growth has probably come through market appreciation. We don't generally lose clients, so your math is good. It's clean, right? If we lost clients, we'd have attrition and have to replace them, which doesn't really happen for us. So about maybe 2/3 of our growth has come from referrals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, I also learned this, that if you have a business where you have high churn, then you have no time to serve your customers.
And if you're spending a lot of effort on business development, you're spending less time on serving your customers, and you're going to have higher churn.
They're not going to refer them because they're not going to get a good service, and then they're going to churn instead of referring. So it's very smart.
We do an annual survey of our clients, and we score always above 95% in terms of satisfaction. We also do an annual survey with our team members as well, and we score really, really high. The greatest evidence of that is our turnover is damn near 0% since we launched the company. Generally, people who work with us don't leave us.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're doing a lot of things right. It seems like you have a clear plan. You've got strategic planning. You understand what you want, what you need, what you don't need. What is one thing that you're actively trying to figure out asset management business?
Well, we launched, unfortunately, a tax practice this year. I say unfortunately because we had no interest in competing with CPAs. We usually historically had referred our clients to CPAs. There's a problem in the tax business. My assessment is that taxes are becoming more complex, not less. Less people want to become accountants, and there's a supply-demand problem with accountants. And the existing accountants, my perception is they've taken on way too many clients, and their service is radically deteriorating. We get more and more complaints about clients' dissatisfaction conversation with their accountants than anything else in our practice. And so we finally just said, you know what, we're going to beta test the tax practice for 15 clients. We're doing their tax returns this year. And I never wanted to do this type of business. It really makes sense to do it because financial planning and tax really is intertwined. The fact that they were ever separate disciplines actually, in retrospect, makes no sense whatsoever. So I'm glad I'm being forced to do this, but it's a problem. I'm not sure how great we are at it. I hope we don't suck too much at it this year with these 15 people. And I hope we are eventually really, really great at it. But it's a problem for me, and I'm not happy about it.
So you said there are 13 people in the wealth management. So you have a couple of people on the tax side?
Yeah, we have, call it 1.5 people dedicated to tax. And then we partnered. Well, there's one more variable in tax, which is interesting. I believe AI will eventually do 90+% of the work that an accountant does. There's an intersection or an inflection point that hasn't been hit yet, which is less accountants, more complex tax work needed to be done. AI hasn't solved it yet. And my hypothesis is that we can start to develop the muscle memory and the mastery around doing tax. And eventually AI will be such a supporter for us that we'll be able to do tax returns for all of our clients with a relatively small number of people. That's our hypothesis. In the interim, we've partnered with a company called April, which is a startup, venture-backed startup, that provides the analysis and the tax return prep. So we have 1.5 people who organize the tax work for our client base, but then the actual heavy lifting of the analysis is done by April. If April's listening to this, it's fine. When I say we're perfectly happy to replace April with AI once AI is ready, but it just isn't ready. So we're just getting started on something we know that we believe will eventually be actually relatively easy, but right now it's just clunky.
I don't know if it was Warren Buffett or whether it was someone else or maybe his partner who talked about how important tax planning is in actually making money. And if you do the right kind of tax planning, it's basically 1/2 of the return you can make by just optimizing on your taxes. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't know that I'd be comfortable saying blanket statement of 1/2. I think the wealthier you are, the higher the probability is that with advanced tax planning, the net impact on your wealth over time could be more than half. I mean, think about estate planning. We have a client, for example, who a taxable estate is one where your net worth is over, I'm going to simplify and say 13 million per person. So a married couple, $26 million. Anything over that gets taxed at, again, I'm averaging around 50% estate tax when you die. Okay, so what can you do? You can, while you're alive, give away some of your 13 million rather than waiting till you die. Well, how can you do that? Well, maybe you can make investments in your kid's name rather than your name as part of that 13 million. Well, we had a client, by way of example, who invested in a company that ended up being worth to them $60 million. But guess what? The 60 million was not in their name. It was in their kid's name. So it skipped a generation. So I don't know, what is that worth? 50% of anything over 26 million at estate tax. What is that worth in terms of average annual return? I don't know. You can't really do the calculation, but it's millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, so it's very high leverage. That's the point.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, you gave some really good ideas here. I like the framework, identify your goals, articulate them, share them with other people. I like the sharing because it basically creates some peer accountability, right? And also people are then aligned with what your context is. So that's great. Measure and execute. That's great. We talked about OKRs, we talked about tax planning, we talked about the philosophy of building businesses, the difference between a business that needs to grow and then one that doesn't, can just grow by themselves. That's amazing. Anything else you'd like to share with your audience? And then I'm going to ask you, of course, if people would like to learn more about what you do and would like to learn more about One Wealth Financial Advisors, where should they go and where can they learn more? But what's your last message to our listeners?
Well, you didn't rehash the first thing I said, which is it's always about people. It's always about people. Everything one does in life, in my opinion, should be in the service of others somehow. And I think that's going to give us our greatest sense of satisfaction, self-worth, place in the world. And so I really want to leave people with that message. In terms of reaching me, I have a website I built because I have a bunch of different stuff I do. So One Wealth Advisors has its own website, which you could easily search. But I also have davidsteele.xyz, davidsteele.xyz, which primarily points to One Wealth, but then points to the other stuff I do, including other businesses I've started and the boards I'm on and the consulting work that we do.
Okay, that's definitely worth exploring. So check it out. And if you enjoyed this conversation and you listen here, don't forget to subscribe and tune in, because every week I have an exciting entrepreneur come on the show and share their learnings and insights. That's it for this episode. Keep moving your business forward. Subscribe at stevebreda.com/newsletter.